There's a kind of silence that follows heartbreak, a silence so heavy it almost hums. On a quiet morning in Dallas, that silence was broken by the sound of sirens. A young woman, full of light and life, had been found by the side of a road. Her name was Dishaye Stevenson, and just hours earlier, she was alive, smiling, and planning her future. She wasn't just another face in a headline. She was a 35-year-old mother, daughter, friend, and businesswoman. A woman who believed in giving second chances, even to those who might not have deserved them. And yet, that kindness, that faith in love, would ultimately lead her into the arms of tragedy. As the news spread across Dallas, people who knew her couldn't believe it. Not Dishaye, they said. She had so much going for her. She was just getting started. But behind her beautiful smile and her thriving business, ShayMoney purses and more, something darker had been growing. A shadow that had been slowly moving closer, step by step, until it finally caught up to her. In the world's eyes, Dishaye was winning. She'd built her brand from the ground up, balancing motherhood, entrepreneurship, and independence. Her social media pages sparkled with positivity and ambition. Friends described her as vibrant, driven, a woman who could walk into a room and make everyone feel seen. But what they didn't see was what she carried in private. Because when it comes to relationships, sometimes love and danger walk hand in hand. Those closest to her would later say she was trying to make things work with a man she once believed in, a man she supported not just emotionally, but financially. Reports would later reveal that Dishaye had given him large sums of money, hoping to help him rebuild his life. To her, it was compassion. To him, perhaps it was something else entirely. The morning she lost her life started like any other. The sun rising over Dallas, the city coming alive with routine, people heading to work, children off to school. Dishaye had plans, things to do, messages to respond to. But somewhere along that morning drive, her path crossed with danger. By noon, police would arrive at a scene on Murdoch Road. The woman they found there was Dishaye, gone, her life taken far too soon. The community was in shock. Her family shattered. Her daughter, now faced with a world missing its brightest light. It didn't make sense. Not for a woman who gave so much, who tried so hard to see the best in others. But as detectives began to dig deeper, a clearer, and more chilling picture began to form. One filled with control, financial strain, and emotional turmoil that had quietly built up behind the walls of a relationship the public thought was loving. And as those pieces came together, the question everyone asked was simple: how could something like this happen to someone like her? Because behind every headline, there's a human story. Behind every crime scene, there's a trail of red flags that might have been missed. In Dishaye's story, we find not just heartbreak, but a warning. A reflection of how dangerous it can be when love turns possessive, when loyalty becomes a weapon, and when kindness is taken for granted. Her story reminds us that tragedy doesn't always come from strangers in the dark. Sometimes, it comes from the very people we let into our hearts. This is the story of Dishaye Stevenson, a woman who believed in love, who built her dream from nothing, and who never saw the storm coming. Over the next few minutes, we'll uncover what really happened, the clues left behind, and the truth about how a love that once promised forever turned into a story of heartbreak, loss, and justice. Before her name became a headline, Dishaye Stevenson was simply Shay to the people who loved her, a woman whose laughter could fill a room, whose determination inspired everyone around her. Born on November 16, 1988, in Dallas, Texas, she grew up in a tight-knit family that believed in hard work, community, and faith. From a young age, Shay carried a light, the kind of energy that made people gravitate toward her. She was quick to smile, quicker to help, and never afraid to dream big, even when life gave her every reason not to. As a little girl, she wasn't one to sit still. She played sports, soccer, basketball, track, anything that kept her moving. Teachers remembered her as driven and charismatic. Friends called her the glue, the one who always held everyone together, even when things were falling apart. But what made Shay special wasn't just her ambition. It was her heart. She had this way of making people feel seen, like they mattered. That same empathy would one day lead her to open her heart to someone she thought she could save, a choice that would change everything. By her mid-20s, Dishaye was a proud mother. Her daughter was her world, her why. Everything she did for her child. There were nights when she'd stay up late, working on business ideas, sketching designs, writing down goals. The next morning, she'd be up before dawn, preparing breakfast, getting her daughter ready, then heading to work. Shay was relentless. She refused to let struggle define her. And slowly, all that effort began to pay off. In 2021, she launched ShayMoney Purses and More, a boutique business selling handbags, accessories, and stylish essentials. The name itself was a mix of her nickname, Shay, and her belief in independence, money representing freedom, stability, and the ability to stand tall on her own terms. To her followers on social media, Shay was the definition of self-made. A modern woman carving her lane, balancing motherhood and entrepreneurship with confidence. Her business flourished, her brand grew, and her joy radiated from every post she shared. But while her business life was shining, her personal world was quietly shifting. Sometime during that success, Shay reconnected with a man named Michael Smith. Their story began like so many others, with charm, chemistry, and promises of forever. He made her laugh, told her she was special, made her feel like she didn't have to do it all alone anymore. At first, it was everything she'd hoped for. After years of building and providing, she wanted partnership. She wanted someone who would see her not just as strong, but soft, feminine, cared for. Michael filled that space, at least for a while. He told her he'd change, that the mistakes of his past were behind him. And Shay, being the kind-hearted woman she was, believed in redemption. When people asked her why she gave him a chance, she'd smile and say, "Everyone deserves one." But those who knew her best sensed something wasn't right. Over time, small cracks began to form. There were whispers of control, jealousy, tension, questions about money. Shay was doing well, but she was also generous. She lent support, gave financially, and invested emotionally. According to later reports, she may have given Michael as much as $10,000, money she had worked hard to earn. To her, it was love. To him, perhaps it became dependence. But love mixed with control is dangerous ground. Those close to her noticed changes. Shay was quieter on social media. Her once frequent posts became more reserved. Her smile still shone, but something behind her eyes had dimmed. Still, she brushed it off, telling her friends she was fine, that things would get better. She wanted to believe that. She needed to believe that.
What's your birthday? Okay. Yeah. My birthday in 7 days. Why you setting me up? Turn the... How the hell? Got the blue light on you. Yep. Is that the same one you had before you went in? Yep. I don't know, I'm trying to see if that's pretty good. There's 100 grams on your wrist. You like 100 grams? Hey, great. You do? What you think about the first group, baby? Let me see, baby. What you think? Did it remind you of the one that you had at first, baby? It done changed, you know, gold and stuff done changed in that 7 years, 8 years. What you think about your first gift?
Dallas mornings can be beautiful, sunlight spilling over rooftops, the hum of early traffic, that sense of new beginnings. For Shay, those mornings were often filled with plans, deliveries, errands, business goals. And that's what made October 25, 2023, so haunting. It started like any other day. There were no warnings, no farewells. Just routine. By the afternoon, everything had changed. A passerby spotted a car on the side of Murdoch Road, in southeast Dallas. Inside was a woman, unresponsive. Police were called. Sirens wailed. When authorities arrived, they confirmed the unthinkable. It was Dishaye Stevenson. She had been shot. News spread quickly across social media and local outlets. The name, Dishaye Stevenson, began to appear in headlines, and with it came disbelief. Friends flooded her comment sections, writing things like, "This can't be real. She was just talking about her business last week," Not Shay, she didn't deserve this. Her family was shattered. Her mother's voice broke during interviews. Her daughter, too young to understand, kept asking when her mom would come home. The city of Dallas mourned, not just because of the loss, but because of how it happened. Police investigations quickly pointed toward someone close to her. The story began to unfold piece by piece, a relationship marked by control, jealousy, and tension that had quietly escalated behind closed doors. The man she had once trusted, the one she believed she could build a future with, had now become the center of a criminal investigation. And suddenly, everything about Dishaye's life, her kindness, her generosity, her dreams, was being re-examined through the lens of tragedy. Before the world knew her as a victim, she was simply Dishaye, a woman who tried to make the world around her a little better, who built her empire one handbag at a time, who laughed too loud, loved too hard, and believed too deeply. Her story is not just about loss. It's about how the brightest spirits can sometimes attract the darkest storms. Because when love turns silent, when fear hides behind smiles, and when someone's strength becomes mistaken for invincibility, tragedy can move quietly until it's too late. As police pieced together the timeline, friends replayed every conversation, every text, every moment that suddenly felt like a missed warning. And as Dallas held its breath, one question echoed across every living room, every news segment, every social feed. How did it come to this? The answer, buried in the days and decisions leading up to that morning, would soon unravel. And with it, the heartbreaking revelation of what really happened to Dishaye Stevenson. When the Dallas Police Department began their investigation into the death of 35-year-old Dishaye Stevenson, the first 48 hours were crucial. The scene itself offered few answers. Just a car on the side of Murdoch Road, a shattered window, a silence that felt almost deliberate. No sign of robbery. No indication of a random act of violence. It seemed too personal, too precise. Investigators began retracing her final hours. Where had she gone that morning? Who had she spoken to last? And, most importantly, who might have wanted to hurt her? The first name that kept surfacing was one that made family members flinch. Michael Smith, her husband, her partner, the man she had once loved and trusted. For those who knew them, the revelation was devastating, but not entirely surprising. There had been signs, small, subtle moments that in hindsight painted a much darker picture. Detectives started by piecing together Shay's life in the weeks leading up to her death. Her phone records showed long conversations, text exchanges that began warmly but often ended in tension. Witness statements revealed that she had been trying to distance herself, to create space. She had plans that didn't seem to include Michael. Friends told police that Dishaye had become quieter in recent months, that her once frequent public appearances were becoming rare. She just wanted peace, one friend told reporters. She didn't like confrontation. She wanted to believe that things could get better. But inside her home, the atmosphere had changed. According to early reports, there had been arguments about money. Dishaye had built her business from the ground up, working late nights, balancing orders, managing marketing and sales, all while raising her daughter. Michael, on the other hand, had struggled to find steady footing. He'd promised to do better, to find work, to support her. And she, always compassionate, always believing in the best of people, had helped him. At one point, it said that she gave him a large amount of money, around $10,000, to help him rebuild. That act of generosity, meant to heal and support, may have instead deepened resentment. For some, money becomes more than just currency, it becomes control. And when that control feels threatened, anger follows. As detectives dug deeper, they uncovered troubling history. There were reports of emotional manipulation, patterns of dependency, and subtle isolation. Friends had grown concerned. Family had warned her to be careful. But Dishaye's nature was to forgive. She always thought people could change, one relative said softly. That's just who she was. She saw the good even when others couldn't. In the days before her death, however, there were signs that she might have been preparing to move on. She had recently reconnected with her friends more often, taken new photos for her business, and spoken about expanding ShayMoney. She wanted to focus on herself again. She wanted to breathe. To anyone else, that would have been a new beginning. But to someone who feared losing control, it could have felt like the end. The timeline began to take shape. In the early morning hours of October 25, 2023, Dishaye left her home. What happened next is still the subject of police reports and public speculation, but somewhere during that morning drive, her life intersected with danger. Police believe that a confrontation took place, though details remain under investigation. What's clear is that when officers found her vehicle, she had been shot. There was no evidence of theft, no random motive. Whoever did it knew her. By the time her family got the call, hours had passed. A mother's world stopped. Her daughter's life changed forever. When investigators brought Michael Smith in for questioning, he was calm, perhaps too calm. His version of events was inconsistent. As the interview continued, small details began to unravel. Within days, he was charged with her murder and held on a $1 million bond. The community was stunned. News outlets picked up the story almost immediately. Dallas entrepreneur shot and killed, husband charged. Police, domestic violence suspected in death of local business owner. Photos of Dishaye began circulating, her wide smile, her stylish outfits, her confident poses promoting her business. But alongside those pictures came something else, disbelief. Because behind those images of success, a quiet tragedy had been unfolding. Domestic violence advocates began to speak out. They pointed out how often victims are strong, successful women who appear to have it all together but carry their pain privately. Many of them saw themselves in Dishaye's story. Social media flooded with messages, "She was doing everything right. We have to talk about this. Love shouldn't hurt." As the investigation deepened, family and friends began to piece together their own painful timeline. There were moments they had dismissed as small, missed calls, vague posts, an offhand comment about needing space. Now, those moments felt heavy with meaning. Her best friend described a late-night phone call weeks before her death. She said she was tired, she recalled. Not just tired from work, tired in her spirit. I told her, "You can't pour from an empty cup." She laughed, but there was something in her voice. Like she wanted to say more, but didn't. Others remembered how she avoided confrontation, how she believed that keeping the peace was better than walking away. It was easier to forgive, to hope, to believe that things would get better. But sometimes, hope can be dangerous when the other person doesn't want peace. They want control. In the weeks after Michael's arrest, details continued to emerge. A motive rooted in jealousy, financial strain, and emotional turmoil. The portrait that formed was one of a man unable to accept the independence of the woman beside him. Dishaye was rising, financially, emotionally, socially. And to someone whose sense of identity depended on control, that rise might have felt like rejection. That's the tragedy so many victims of intimate partner violence face. Love becomes a battleground. Her success, once something to celebrate, became a source of tension. Her independence, once her pride, became a perceived threat. And when someone like Dishaye tries to leave, to reclaim her voice, that's often the moment when danger peaks. The emotional fallout was immense. Her mother, unable to speak without tears, told reporters, she had a big heart. She loved too hard. Her words became a haunting refrain, love too hard. Her daughter, shielded from the media, was now being raised by family members who promised to tell her, when she was old enough, about who her mother really was, not just how she died, but how she lived. Friends held vigils, lighting candles and releasing balloons into the Texas sky. Each balloon carried a message. You are loved. You are missed. You are free. The community began rallying around the hashtag Justice for Dishaye. Her story wasn't just about loss anymore. It had become a symbol. A reminder that behind every smiling photo, every "I'm fine," there might be someone struggling to survive an invisible storm. As the months passed, the case against Michael Smith grew stronger. Evidence aligned. Witnesses came forward. The community's grief turned into a call for justice. But for those who loved her, no courtroom verdict could erase the what-ifs. What if she had told someone? What if she had walked away sooner? What if someone had noticed? Those are the questions that linger long after the sirens fade. Because for every Dishaye, there are countless others whose names we'll never hear. Women trying to balance love and safety, forgiveness and fear. Her death became a mirror, forcing a city to confront uncomfortable truths about domestic violence, about the ways society often overlooks the warning signs until it's too late. The deeper truth, however, was this: Dishaye didn't just die because someone pulled a trigger. She died because love, when mixed with control, can become lethal. She believed in change. She believed in love. She believed in forgiveness. And that belief was used against her. In the end, her story became more than tragedy, it became a movement. People began sharing resources, speaking openly about emotional abuse, financial manipulation, and control. Her name carried a new kind of strength, a reminder that awareness saves lives. But as justice loomed closer, those closest to her found themselves caught between grief and fury. They wanted answers. They wanted accountability. But above all, they wanted to make sure her story wasn't forgotten. Because remembering her wasn't just about mourning, it was about learning. For Dishaye Stevenson, the truth had finally surfaced. But the emotional wreckage left behind would take years to heal. Her friends, her family, her community, all reshaped by her absence, all carrying the weight of her final lesson. That even the strongest hearts can be vulnerable when love turns silent. And that sometimes, the most dangerous place for a woman to be is with the person who swears they love her most. The courtroom was silent, thick with the kind of tension that makes even breathing feel intrusive. Rows of faces filled the benches, family, friends, reporters, and strangers who had followed every detail of the case. At the center of it all sat Michael Smith, hands folded, eyes downcast. Across from him, the family of Dishaye Stevenson, their faces drawn but composed. They had waited months for this moment. Months of grief, disbelief, and endless questions. The air felt heavy with everything unsaid. When the prosecutor began to speak, her voice was steady, clear, unwavering. She painted a picture not just of a crime, but of a pattern. A slow erosion of trust, a descent into jealousy and control, and a tragic act born from entitlement. She spoke of Dishaye's dreams, her growing success, her love for her daughter, and how all of that was taken in one senseless act. Then came the evidence: messages, phone records, witness statements. It was no longer speculation. It was a story of betrayal unfolding under the bright lights of justice. Each piece of evidence felt like another layer of heartbreak. Because every message, every text, was proof of her trying to fix, to forgive, to survive. When her mother was called to the stand, the room grew still. Her voice trembled, but her words cut through the silence. "She was my only daughter," she said softly. "She worked so hard to make something of herself. She wanted to build a life. And she trusted him." She paused, looking directly at the man accused of taking her daughter's life. "You didn't just take her from me. You took her from her little girl. You took her from her dreams." There wasn't a dry eye in that courtroom. As testimony continued, the defense tried to shift the narrative, painting the act as a crime of passion, a moment of loss and control. But the evidence was unrelenting. Witnesses described arguments, moments of manipulation, and the fear Dishaye had begun to carry silently. The prosecution argued that this wasn't a sudden outburst. It was calculated. And as the jury listened, you could see it, the realization washing over them, that this wasn't just a domestic dispute gone wrong. It was the story of a woman who tried to love too much, forgive too long, and trust too deeply. When the verdict was read, time seemed to freeze. "Guilty." The word echoed through the room. Some gasped. Some wept. And in that moment, a strange silence followed. A silence that wasn't relief, but something heavier. Because even though justice had been served, Dishaye was still gone. Her mother clutched a photo of her daughter, whispering something only she could hear. Her siblings held each other, crying quietly. And though the sentence would keep Michael Smith behind bars for years, the family knew there was no real victory here. Justice can punish, but it can never restore what was lost. In the months that followed, Dallas began to heal, but not forget. Murals appeared across the city, painted with her likeness, radiant smile, confident pose, and the words, "Justice for ShayMoney." Candlelight vigils became community gatherings, where survivors shared their stories and advocates offered resources. Her name became a rallying cry for change. Nonprofits and organizations started new domestic violence awareness campaigns, using her story as a reminder that success and suffering can coexist quietly, that strength doesn't always mean safety. On social media, her story spread far beyond Texas. From California to New York, women began sharing their own experiences under hashtags like #JusticeForDishaye and #ShayMoneyStrong. One viral post read, "She was beautiful. She was successful. She was loved. But even she wasn't safe." If you're reading this and you feel trapped, please reach out. Don't wait. Don't think love will fix it. Those words were shared over 500,000 times. Meanwhile, her daughter, just a little girl, was being raised by her grandmother. Her laughter, they said, reminded them of Dishaye. Her mannerisms, her confidence, it was like seeing her mother again. They made a promise that she would grow up knowing not just how her mother died, but how she lived. They told her about the long nights when her mom worked tirelessly building ShayMoney, about how she loved music and cooking, about her kindness, her strength, and her smile that could light up a room. She was a fighter, her mother would tell her. And you come from her. That means you're a fighter too. But even as life slowly found a new rhythm, there were moments when the pain returned. Birthdays, anniversaries, the days that used to be filled with phone calls and laughter. At every vigil, Dishaye's name was spoken with love, but also with a lingering sadness. Her story wasn't just about tragedy. It became a lesson, a warning. Because her death revealed something many people overlook, that domestic violence doesn't always start with bruises. It can begin with control, subtle, emotional, invisible control that tightens over time. It can sound like, "You don't need to go out tonight. I just want to know where you are. I'll take care of the money. You don't have to talk to them anymore." At first, it feels like love. But slowly, it becomes a cage. And Dishaye's story forced people to confront that reality, to look closer, to listen, to believe victims before it's too late. In an emotional interview months later, one of her closest friends reflected on what she wished she had said. "I wish I had pushed harder. I wish I had asked more questions. I wish I had told her, 'You deserve to be safe.'" Her voice cracked. "We always think we have more time." The community foundation started in her name, the Dishaye Stevenson Foundation, now provides resources for women in abusive relationships. It funds safe housing, counseling, and legal support. Every year, they host the ShayMoney Empowerment Gala, celebrating women who've survived and rebuilt their lives. What began as mourning turned into movement. And for those who follow true crime, her story became more than just another case. It became a call to awareness, a reminder that behind every headline is a real person with real dreams, taken too soon. Because the truth is, this wasn't just a crime of passion. It was a story of power, control, and the cost of silence. If you close your eyes and picture her, you might see her as she once was, standing behind her brand, confident and glowing, full of ideas about the future. You'd never know that just behind that bright smile was someone fighting to hold her world together. And that's what makes her story so haunting, because it could happen to anyone. In the quiet aftermath of tragedy, her name now lives on, not as a victim, but as a voice. A voice that whispers, "Don't ignore the signs. Don't let fear silence you. Don't believe that love should hurt." If you or someone you know is in a situation that doesn't feel safe, please reach out. In the U.S., you can call or text the National Domestic Violence Hotline at 1-800-799-7233 or visit thehotline.org. Your life matters. Your peace matters. And like Dishaye, your story deserves a different ending. Dishaye Stevenson was more than a headline. She was a daughter, a mother, a businesswoman, and a dreamer. Her light may have been dimmed too soon, but through her story, she continues to illuminate the path for others, to seek safety, to value themselves, and to recognize that love without respect isn't love at all. If Dishaye's story touched you, Please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe. Every share spreads awareness. Every view honors her memory. Leave a comment below with a message for survivors, or simply say her name, #Justice for Dishaye, because her voice deserves to echo beyond this tragedy. And maybe, just maybe, her story will save someone else's life.